Sandra Embleton speaking for the All That Is. So the place I go to up north, there's two gardens. There's a fairy garden and there's a Garden of Eden. And the fairy garden has God in it and is a perfect natural circle in nature, which makes an incredibly powerful transmitter for that fairy loving energy, where beings that exist in the fairy realm are able to show themselves to you. They're able to come out as faces in trees and logs and clouds and the water. Being in that fairy garden is being in a magical land where the price you pay for entrance is to acknowledge what you see and not doubt it. And the more you're open to see things you never thought or speak to spirits that exist there in higher realms, the more open you are, and the less you judge, the more they feel welcome to come forward and say, hey, I'm in here, or hey, there's a face coming through those leaves, or hey, I see that tree. There's an eye in that tree. That eye is speaking to me. And that type of openness to receive messages allows you to receive messages, allows you to see beings in the fairy realm. And I've discovered this and had many experience speaking with spirits, not just up north, and in my home as well, in my back garden as well. And being peaceful and still in that environment, again, going into the silence and listening, you're able to hear them speak to you. This is not something that a privileged few can do. This is something we all have the ability to do. We just maybe don't know how to get there. And really all it is for me is suspending my judgment. Oh, this is crazy. This is stupid. Who's going to believe this? This isn't really happening. I didn't hear that, blah, blah, blah. It's your willingness to be a child and play pretend. Play pretend. Just allow yourself to be in a mind frame that you used to as a child when you made up your friends. You had pretend friends, and you'd get on a wooden horse and you'd ride it, but it was a real one to you. That energy of horse was coming through, and that horse was your buddy, your pal. And you could talk to it and it could talk back, and you became one with it. It is, a child has a beautiful imagination and an ability to play and let that kingdom come through. When we as adults lose that through cynicism or through the argument that comes through as the doubt and the shame and the blame that, oh, you shouldn't be able to do that, you're an adult, who's going to take you seriously, blah, 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 la, la, la. Do you want to have fun or not? Do you want to go for a ride in the fairy realm or not? If it's too stupid for you and you don't want to, don't do it. But if you really want to experience like heaven on earth and the fun part, then this is how to do it. You suspend your critical thinking. You suspend your judgment. You welcome in that little child of yours that would lie in the grass. Look up at the stars. Look up at the clouds. Spin around in circles so you felt sick and fell down on your ass on the front lawn. And you're spinning and you're lying there. You're looking at the clouds. I remember doing that. It was so much fun. I just had a great imagination. And that imagination is still within us. We shut it down. And so now it's time to wake it up. So that's my fairy garden. And the Garden of Eden is actually being guarded by Elizabeth, who's John the Baptist's mother, who herself is a miracle, who herself is a woman of God, who herself was such an obedient servant to God that when God came to her when she was in her late 80s, 90s, said you're going to have a son, it was, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'm going to risk ridicule and judgment. People are going to point and stare at me. They're going to make fun of me. They're not going to understand it. But my faith in God and my love for God supersedes that. So if that's what's to happen, I'll put up with it. I'll just look the other way. I'll smile and say, yeah, I'm sure you're right. That's what you're seeing. Yep, you're going to see this old woman and you're, going to, whatever you're going to think. But that ability to love God above all is what Elizabeth carries. To be able to have John the Baptist as your son, which carried the Christ consciousness until it was passed over to Christ during that day on the river of Jordan when he was baptized, and that transference occurred. God is in all things. And when John the Baptist's purpose was served, it was time for him to go. And people criticize Christ because they were, oh, you should have shown up. You could have saved him. Well, it's like me. I could have stayed longer on my holiday if I wanted to. But it was time for me to go home. So if it's time for you to go, it's time for you to go. It's time for John to go. I digress. Going back to the Garden of Eden, it really does exist. And what I noticed was, if you were to look for the Garden of Eden where I know it exists, you wouldn't find it because, well, I shouldn't say that, but if you're not awake, you wouldn't find it because you would let the exterior appearance dissuade you from pursuing what is really there. And I'm going to rephrase that. The Garden of Eden is located on a property that looks like a junkyard. A junkyard. And most people drive by and look at it, and there's garbage and furniture, and the doors are off the hinges, and things are falling apart, and it's unkept. This place is totally falling apart, and you can tell it looks like no one's loving it. But that's just a facade. That's not really. That junk is hiding an energy, a portal. God's Garden of Eden, a place where you can go and connect with God and feel God and be with God. It's actually on the back of that property. And perhaps that's God's plan, to hide it in plain sight, to put up what would seem I'm not going to, that place is a junkie, but I'm not going to go there. The Garden of Eden wouldn't be there. It would be in a beautiful place. It would be a perfectly manicured lawn with beautiful, beautiful trees and shrubs and flowers. That would be the Garden of Eden. And my point is, when you must look past appearances. You must look past appearances, because finding the Garden of Eden is like finding Camelot, or I think in The Mummy, what was it? There was Casamatra. I'm getting that name wrong. But the city that they couldn't find until the sun rose up, and when the sun rose up, it hit the city, and then it showed them where they were going. Oh, anyway, I'll let it go. But you know where I mean if you've seen The Mummy. Anyway, finding Camelot is the same thing. You can't find it in plain sight. You must go through the mists. You must go through the veil. You must enter into the kingdom of heaven. You must open up that secret door. And how that's done, it's with your spirit. You use your spirit to find it. You use your God compass, your guidance, and you allow all things to be magical. I've done other videos and I've talked about discoveries that are coming up on the planet and more discoveries that will be made, but they will be made for those of us who are able to move up into those higher dimensions, those higher frequencies, those higher levels of consciousness that will reveal to us where to look, where to dig, how to know this, how not. We are multidimensional beings, and the answers are all there for us. Greg Braden, all the solutions are all here for us. Well, so's all the answers to all our questions. So are all those magical kingdoms. Yeah, I'm hearing, I'm going to discover Mount Olympus. I'll find out where it is, where it's located. But I'm going to say something else now that seems a little hard to understand, but I'm going to put this out there. When you're an energetic being and you inhabit a place, you bring that energy into that place where you are, and it comes alive. And the veil parts, and you gain access to the secret heavenly realms. When you leave that place, you bring your energy with you. And without that energy, that place ceases to be that magical kingdom. And so what I'm saying to you is that you create it. You create it. So I will go to the same, if I'm renting the same cottage, going to the same piece of land, and I know there's fairies in the fairy garden. And when I go there, I can talk to them, and that's real for me. And that energy that is the God presence in that place fills me, and it fills the area. When I leave, it goes with me, and it goes back undercover. All right, let me give you an example. The cottage I rented where I lived in that fairy garden for 12 years, I go every year, and I would put my energy every summer into that fairy garden for a good 4 or 5 weeks. That energy lifted up that property in the area. The colors were brighter. The cottage was brighter. Everything was alive. It came to life. And when I left it, my energy would leave with me, and that place would cease to be that magical kingdom without my acknowledgement of it, without my being there steadily with the realization that that's what it was. But every year I'd come back, I'd recognize it, and it would open for me, and I would be able to be in that fairy garden. But these people where that fairy garden resides stopped renting to me. And as the years went by, it's been 3-4 years since I've been able to be there. Now when I drive by, it's dark. The cottage is dark. The energy's dark. The trees are sad. They miss me. The fairies miss me. They're so sad. And the cottage has gone dark. It would have to do with the inhabitants and the people that are there. And it also has to do with the removal of my energy from the property. Okay, I'm going to give you another example to back this up. When I met the man who I knew to be Jesus, he lived up north, and he lived in Newmarket. And he would, by his own admission, get up every morning as much as he could, and around 5 or 6 o'clock he'd go down to this property called Fairy Lake. And he would sit there and let his energy out. And he'd do it every day, sometimes a couple times a day. But he would sit there and be peaceful. And that God energy from him, that peacefulness from him, radiated out on Fairy Lake. And when we would go there to do our writing and do our work, that place was magical. People showed up. So many people gravitated down to Fairy Lake. It was like, one day I said to him, I said, Dave, and we'd sit there and we watched, there's a sidewalk or a walkway over a bridge in front of us. And I said, Dave, we're in a time portal. And I said, all these souls that are marching up and down in front of us, I wonder who they really are. I wonder what time they've been here. I wonder what dimension they're visiting from. I wonder what planet or galaxy they're visiting from. But they are congregating here because the energy that you emit allows them to come and go. You light this place up with your presence and your peace. And we would hang out there all the time. Every time we met, we would make a trip to Fairy Lake and put our energy out there. So when he died, and a year later, and even was it a year, at least a year later, I went back up there, and the energy was still good. I felt the energy really strong from where he lived. I could feel his presence still in his home, because it's in his in the woodwork, in the bricks, in the building, and it was still in Fairy Lake. It was lovely. But then I didn't. This past summer, I went up again, and I took King Arthur with me. And the energy of the Christ had left. It wasn't there anymore. And it was dull. There's no flowers, no happy people walking by, construction. It was like infiltrated. And the sanctity and the peace and the beauty that was present, because that was his kingdom. That was his Garden of Eden. He created that Garden of Eden and that happy place with his beingness, with his energy, by letting it out and creating it there. And I had to go back this past year to realize, oh my God, without the Christ energy here, this is a different place. This is void of God. This is void of that love. This is void of Christ's peace, calm, and energy. He's been gone from here so long that his energy has left. And I felt it. And it was cold. And it was unwelcoming. And there was no warmth and no love left there for me. And I had to go to see that, because I wouldn't have believed it unless I had experienced that. Same with the Garden of Eden and the Fairy Garden up north, is that as long as the woman who I know as Elizabeth, as long as she resides and holds space for God, that will be the Garden of Eden. And she created it. And I was able to go and make friends with her and be in the garden and recognize what it was for what it was, because the energy was equivalent to what I am used to in the higher realm. So I could recognize exactly. And then I'm hearing, no, this is the Garden of Eden. Don't let all the garbage and the junk in the way of it fool you. It's actually here. But she's put it in there. She's held that land in trust for God. And I'm able to go into the Garden of Eden when I'm up there and praise God and be with this beautiful woman, praising God and knowing the beauty of God is where you are. It's what each individual can see and create right where they are. So that's why they say the kingdom of heaven is accessible, and it's here. It's everywhere you are that you want to create the kingdom of heaven. And it can be your own backyard. It can be your own living room. It's a place where you hold the space for God to come in. And God will transform your everyday living space into the Garden of Eden. Just ask. Just ask. And then be quiet, be still, and take that time to know Him. Sing to Him, talk to her, sing to her, talk to her, to Him, Mother, Father, God. There's no gender, it's the light. It's both one soul of the male and female. It can be no other. That which is void of the feminine, that is masculine, and that which is the feminine, void of the masculine, is an imbalance. And perfect harmony comes in the balance of eternity, which is the male and female coming together with God, creating the mask of eternity. And you you walk into the all that is and all that ever was. I hope I'm helping you understand that there's so many worlds to be discovered. But it all starts right here with you. You don't have to go anywhere except in here. And it's that allowing, it's the asking God, Father, Mother, God, it's asking Father, Mother, God to enter in and show you the way. And then trusting. Ask Christ, He'll show you the way. He says He's the way. Well, ask Him. Show me the way. Show me how to get there. I want to be that peaceful. I want to be that loving. I want to see the miracles. I want to experience heaven on earth. I want to go to Mount Olympus. I want to go to Camelot. I want to go back to Atlantis. Okay, let's go. We're all going to be able to do this now. It's only going to get better.